Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest Ironlights Major League Tournament. I am your commentator today, E. McNeil, the primary dev of Ironlights. And we have just connected to our first match, which should be coming up right now. This is a double elimination tournament, as is the typical style for our Major League tournaments. So both of these players are going to have to win in a best of three. The loser gets to ban after each lost round. And it looks like we have Polifriend versus the Attacker 1 in our first match. The Attacker 1 choosing the Knight as their class. Polifriend starting out on the Berserker. Both very heavy classes in this case. Dual weapon, no shields involved. The Attacker gives a quick charge up to start, and Polifriend goes in on an immediate attack. Going to get a little bit of extra damage off of that little sliver of vulnerability that the Attacker 1 incurred. But the Attacker 1 didn't really give too much away in that, and now has a little bit of extra energy for the revenge attack. Comes in, gets a few big hits, two huge double headshots there on Polifriend, followed up by another one shortly thereafter, getting huge damage here. The Berserker, of course, is not really a very defensively oriented class, but nevertheless, it looks like the Attacker got a really good start here, and is following that up with another quick attack. So doing these sort of short melee attacks following up. Polifriend following up with a kind of a similar style there, same kind of level of aggression, but the Attacker 1 has built up a very large lead in terms of the amount of hit points, meaning that Polifriend is in a really tricky position. Puts down their hammer and seems to be adjusting the controllers. I hope that wasn't affecting them earlier in the match. But as I was saying at the beginning, even if the Attacker 1 gets to, and might actually be able to finish it off right here, that's not going to be the end of things by any means for Poli. So let's see how this plays out. The Attacker 1 only needs really one more hit here. And yeah, it's almost impossible to block both of those blades of the Greatsword with that huge unwieldy hammer. So the Attacker 1 with that big long melee attack is able to finish things off. So Polifriend now has a chance to ban a class of their choosing. They'll communicate that either via voice chat or on Discord chat. And that means that it's possible that we won't be seeing the Knight in the next round. It's also worth mentioning that, and you can blame me, the developer, for this. We are maintaining the ban that we've had in previous matches, previous tournaments, on the Dragoon and Scourge classes, the newest classes that have been added to the game due to ongoing balance concerns. Apologies for that. So that means that there's 8 classes available to any player, and at this point, after the ban coming from Polifriend, the Attacker is going to have a choice of 7. It used to be that there were only 5 classes in Ironlights, so you'd go, if one's banned, you only have a choice of 4. As the game has expanded and more classes have been added, we're seeing more and more flexibility offered in these tournament cases. So even if, for example, you're a fan of heavy classes and one of the heaviest classes gets banned, there's others that you can switch to. There's also kind of an interesting mind game that I feel always happens at this point, sort of in the middle of these best of 3 matches, which is, what you lost to in the previous match. And so if you choose to ban that, you can keep whatever class you picked. But you could also choose not to ban it and take your chances with something else. And it looks like the Attacker 1 has switched over to the Samurai. So this is another two-handed sword class. It's a little different because the katana, the Samurai's weapon, only has one blade as opposed to the Greatsword's double blades. So it's much faster. It still deals a wicked amount of damage, but Poli might be in a much better position now, sticking with the Berserker, because the Berserker is better at defending against a single hit volume at a time, a single, blade basically at a time, because they can block with the hit volume of the shaft of their Warhammer. So we're already seeing that, where Polifriend now has the advantage after that first back and forth, chooses to charge up, trying to finish, do a little bit more damage, and gets a huge 866 damage hit on the Attacker, who's now charging up and trying to do the same. Gets another over 850 damage hit in revenge. Already a sort of very quick back and forth, neither player wanting to leave the other with any vulnerability sort of left unmarked. But as these players keep going back and forth with these really short, aggressive attacks, Polar Friend, in great contrast to the previous round, is maintaining and extending the advantage in hit points, which is where it actually counts. So both players now choosing to take a second to have a break, not leaving any vulnerability left on their health bars, letting a little bit more energy charge up, but then the attacker goes in for the attack. I guess that makes a lot of sense. Gets a few hits on Polar Friend, then Polar Friend chooses to charge up, gets almost a full bar of energy, and so is going to want to do a ton of damage here. It is able to land that big 900 damage hit. Is having trouble landing some more than that. The katana, it does have shield bars baked into it and sort of the where the handle is. So it is possible for it to do a lot of good blocking here. But the attacker is left with just a tiny sliver of health. And Polar Friend, with a bit of a cheeky attack there, pokes them with the base of the Warhammer for a tiny little 93 damage hit that's enough to shatter the opponent. That means that we are at 1-1 at this point in the best of three. The attacker, of course, is going to get a chance to ban the class of their choosing. And Polar Friend might have to switch out of that Berserker there, which seems to be their sort of favored class. The attacker, of course, can stick with Samurai if they so choose, but the sort of mind games, to return to the point I was talking about before, if you know what class your opponent is likely to favor, you can sort of counterpick that. And so we'll see how that turns out. It looks like the attacker is indeed sticking with the Samurai, and Polar Friend switching to what worked so well for the attacker previously, going to the Knight with that huge greatsword. This is always an interesting battle because the greatsword is not nearly as fast and maneuverable as that katana, but it doesn't really need to be. It has those double blades. And so, you have to actually block really carefully with the katana, actually use the shield bars that are built into it. Otherwise, you're always going to be guaranteed to take at least some damage. And then on the attack, the katana needs to, can't just sort of break through the opponent, needs to sort of sneak around it. The players sticking pretty close to each other at this point so far in terms of the hit points. Polar Friend's a little bit further behind, choosing to charge up and go in for a short attack, but doesn't land any hits there. That's going to be really tricky. They really need to, got a couple of hits there to the lower body of the attacker, but leaving Polar Friend with a fair amount of vulnerability. And as we're seeing, when the Samurai lands a hit against vulnerability, they can do enormous amounts of damage. And there come the first ranged attacks that we're seeing of this entire first match, really. Polar Friend now trying to turn things around, getting these big swirling attacks, and gets a couple of really big hits in a row there. Able to start trying to even things out. But again, every time that they're charging up, they're leaving themselves vulnerable to some double damage. And against the Samurai, that's really dangerous. The attacker, very happy to take full advantage of that, getting those big 600, 800 damage hits. And there we see, finishing it off, just carving up the attacker with that katana. A very tricky situation to try to defend against. So that means that the attacker one is taking that first match that we're watching this tournament. But as I always have to remind us, this is a double elimination tournament. And that means that Pulley is not out of the tournament yet. They're moving down to the lower bracket, but have a chance to fight their way all the way back up to the top. The attacker will be moving straight on to round two. We have an odd number of players for this tournament, which means that a few players have had a bye and will be showing up to fight against the attacker and some of the other players in round two. We also, I'm happy to say, have a number of brand new players. Nobody's actually brand new to the game. Everybody who's participating has to have earned the Battle Forged badge in the Discord, which basically means being Platinum 1 level or above. But there's several players who I have not seen in tournaments before, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. It looks like we're hopping into the middle of a match between Ranzi and Dr. Guy. Looks like Ranzi is on the ninja, and Dr. Guy looks like the duelist. So very different classes, some of the lightest classes in the game, very different from what we were seeing in the previous attacker versus Poli match. Dr. Guy on the assault here looks like they have the advantage right now in terms of health and are able to land a good number of hits, but we can't really compare those exactly while Ranzi is sitting on almost a full bar of energy. Now, the duelist is one of the classes that actually has a chance of blocking the ninja, and we're actually seeing that happen here. The first half of this attack, Dr. Guy able to block almost every single hit, but towards the end, Ranzi changed it up, and Dr. Guy, unable to keep up with that sort of swirling pattern, takes a bunch of hits then. Ranzi, though, charging up, leaving the entire rest of the health bar with vulnerability, but Dr. Guy, unless they're going to charge up themselves, is not going to have the necessary energy to take advantage of that vulnerability. So it's a question of sort of how aggressive Dr. Guy wants to be. The reason you might not attack right away is because it's a little less efficient. There's a little bit of energy spent just to start an attack, and so longer attacks tend to be more efficient use of energy. But in a lot of cases, there's a sort of a time-limited opportunity to take advantage of, and that's why we see a lot of these players who are, some of the top players of Ironlights being really aggressive with how they charge up. Now, both players, they're in a tricky position because they're left with very little health. And now at this point, with zero energy on both players, Ranzi has evened it out, has actually clawed their way back to an even match, and both players with so little health aren't able to do much charging up. Ranzi gets enough health to go in for a big melee attack, tries to finish it off, but isn't quite able to do so. Dr. Guy able to get just a tiny hit on that vulnerability for some good damage with the rapier, but it's not quite enough. Ranzi only needs like one or two hits here. Gets one, but not the second. Dr. Guy, I don't even know if there's a pixel of health visible there, but Ranzi able to go in for the final hit and is able to land it. There's almost no health left on either of these players. What a close match there going to Ranzi. We don't know, since we hopped in the middle of this one, whether that was round 1 or 2 or 3. But let's see, the players, it looks like they're going into another round. So that was not the end of it. All right. It looks like we're having a bit of a connection issue. Hopefully that resolves itself. One of these players is actually hosting the match. They have a direct connection to their opponent, so they have relatively low lag there. You know what I think the problem is here? I think somebody else is already connected to this match, and we are seeing their spectator camera. And this is again a case where you can blame the developer, because I think there is a bug that if there's multiple spectators connecting to a match, then when a match restarts, when you sort of go into another round, sometimes it will freeze the game and they'll be forced to sort of reconnect. So apologies for that. It's a really tricky bug. I don't know what caused it. It wasn't a problem before, but there's certain cases, including in these tournaments, where if we have many people who are trying to watch a match live and, trying to watch with their own spectator client instead of just sort of following along on Twitch, it can screw things up. So yeah, my fault, but let's see if we can get back into that match. And if not, then we'll let them finish that on their own and we'll get into another. Ranzi and Dr. Guy are another couple of players who we've seen fighting in previous tournaments, and were matched up against each other in round 1 of this tournament. Neither of them had a bye, so they have the sort of the full distance still to go. So hopefully we'll be able to get back into that. In the meantime, the tradition when we're doing one of these tournaments in between matches is that I will answer any questions that pop up in the stream chat. We had a sort of call out for questions earlier, and so I'm going to try to go back and see if I can find any questions that came up in the chat that I can answer while we're watching here. Seal asks, why is the decoration on the arena tiles different on each side? The answer is that as you see in sort of the stands of the stadium and on the marquees, billboards, and the jumbotrons and all of that, the colors change based on the accent colors of the two players. So, for example, if our last match had white and gold, that's why you're seeing white and gold, as the colors of the arena. And that the same is true on the tiling on the platform that the players are fighting on. It's much more subtle, but or sometimes I should say it can be subtle, but you'll actually notice that the tiling changes color based on the colors of the players. Basically, everything changes to be themed based on what costumes they chose. All right, let's see. Any other questions? B, our vaunted moderator, asks a vitally important question, his words: who is the better cat, Bingus or Big Floppa? I don't know who either of those are. I will say that I have two cats named Null and Void. They're black cats, and they are the best cats. So that should resolve that. All right, it looks like we are connected to a different match. So hopefully we'll be hopping into that in 1 second once the players have chosen their classes. And it looks like they have, so we'll be getting into that right now. And this is Boy Gabe versus, what is this? JD Bradley? I'm going to call this player Bradley. I'm hoping that that's Bradley or JD. I don't know. We'll see what I go with. I've not encountered this player before in these tournaments, to my knowledge. Boy Gabe we have seen in the past. Looks like we have the Duelist versus the Knight here. Bradley on the Duelist, Gabe on the Knight. These are both some of the original classes in Ironlights. Interesting to see them fight each other always. Sort of one of the prototypical light classes versus prototypical heavy class. Boy Gabe starts with a couple of big bursting ranged attacks and then goes in for the first melee assault. Gets a few hits, but Bradley showing that they can handle themselves on defense, able to get some good blocks with the shield there, and now on attack, able to slip around that big bulky greatsword and do some damage here. Remains to be seen if they're able to do quite the same amount, and not the same amount that Boy Gabe was able to do. So I always feel like that very first exchange of attacks at the very beginning kind of sets the stage for the rest of the fight. And in this case, we're seeing Boy Gabe able to do a little bit more damage in the course of that once they're both down to 0 energy. And so I'll say that Boy Gabe is starting this match with a little bit of an advantage. Bradley charges up a bit, happy to incur a bit of vulnerability in order to take advantage of that last bit of vulnerability on Gabe. Gets a hit in, but it seems that Gabe has adapted to the style of attacks coming out from Bradley and is able to block most of that, not taking a ton of damage after those first couple of hits. Bradley sending out a couple of ranged attacks. The Duelist is pretty well situated for those kind of harassing ranged attacks that can arrest the momentum of the energy regeneration on Boy Gabe. But Boy Gabe just went in for that big melee attack and did plenty of damage. Bradley, knowing that they're now really at a disadvantage on the back foot, chooses to charge up, get a full bar of energy for this long melee attack, hoping to do a ton of damage here and try to even things out. But if they're unable to do so, and despite doing a little more damage than previous attacks, not really bringing Boy Gabe down to a really meaningfully low level of health, that means Boy Gabe able to charge up to almost full bar of energy and go in for a huge attack against a mostly vulnerable opponent. Only really needs one more hit here, and yep, there it is. able to land it and finish off Bradley for the first round win here. Bradley now able to ban a class of their choosing, doesn't have to fight against that knight again. It might be tricky though. Boy Gabe, as I've mentioned, we've seen in other tournaments, might be quite a challenge to be able to beat here. So it might be an interesting time to try, it's one of sort of more dangerous class or a strategy that's a little more out there, but let's see what they end up going with. I think the player has put down the headset to type out the ban on Discord. So we'll just give them a moment to take that into account and choose their new classes for the next round. And here we go. Round 2, Boy Gabe versus Bradley. And interestingly, it looks like we have the same... Wait a second. Have I been mixing the players up? No. Okay. Boy Gabe on Duelist. Bradley switching to the Monk. Starting off with the first melee attack, getting a couple of big hits in with that quarterstaff, spinning around. Its trademark, of course, able to hit with one side while recharging with the other. But not able to land a lot of hits in total. However, Boy Gabe, with the revenge attack, only able to do about an equal amount of damage. And now Boy Gabe, having switched to the Duelist, is getting a couple of good hits in on with the harassing ranged attack, meaning that with the energy regeneration advantage, even though Boy Gabe has been firing these range attacks, now has a significant advantage in terms of energy. But decides to finish, stop that little range duel and go in for the attack now. All right, sorry, I keep getting mixed up on which player is which. I don't know what's wrong with me. I think that it's because this is one of those maps with relatively low lighting, and the players' accents are white and black, and so I keep getting confused when I'm looking at like the text colors. So apologies for the little brain skip there. Boy Gabe able to get a couple of good hits in on that melee attack. Firing some range attacks, able to do some significant harassment here. Now going in for the melee, starts off with a good headshot and hit to the shoulder, but then Bradley able to successfully do some good blocking on the latter half of that attack, prevent any further hits from coming in. Takes a little hit from one of those range attacks going in for the start of this melee. Despite that, able to get a couple of good hits in, one good headshot. Not really doing the total, mass damage that's going to be necessary to really finish off this this opponent. And Boy Gabe able to continue getting those little harassing range attacks to arrest Bradley's energy regeneration, meaning Bradley feeling sort of with no choice to gain that energy other than charging up, does so, charges up and goes in for the attack, but then is left with no energy and some vulnerability when it's time for Boy Gabe to charge up and get revenge. Meaning Boy Gabe able to really rack up the damage there, getting double damage on each of those hits. Bradley, again, unfortunately taking several of these range attack hits, having trouble with the blocking there, and left with no choice but to charge up and leave the remaining health in vulnerable state. Able to get a bunch of good hits now on this melee attack. That's the sort of attack that Bradley would need throughout this battle in order to be able to finish it off. But now it looks like Boy Gabe, charged up with a good amount of energy, is doing some very tricky kind of style of attacks here. A lot of sort of spinning of that weapon, but has enough energy and is able to get enough hits in to finish off this fight, meaning round 2 goes to Boy Gabe, finishing off that match in Gabe's favor. All right, hopefully my brain has recovered and I won't be mixing up which player is which quite so much in future matches. But that was a round 2 match. Boy Gabe will be moving on to round 3. Um, let's see if we can hop into it. It looks like we've got another match in progress. I believe this one is, yes, Ramsey versus Supine Swine, also labeled Lefishy in the Discord. Looks like the players, though, they're at full energy, and one of the players is, or they both put their weapons down. What possibly is happening here is that somebody had called a timeout, and in some cases, players are just happy to accommodate that. It throws off energy regeneration, gives you a chance to sort of get some of that back. But as long as both players are cool with it, then both players are cool with it. Supine Swine going in for the attack on the Reaper here. Ramsey doing some fancy spinning here, just showing off a little bit some of those stylish moves. Supine Swine has to be blocking these with the shield bars of that Reaper's Scythe. And although right now at the end of the attack, they're successfully getting a couple of blocks in, stopping Ramsey from getting the final blow they were looking for. Ramsey charges up to get the energy for this final attack, and Supine Swine isn't going to let them just get away with it. Goes in and gets a couple of hits in, doing some damage. But nevertheless, Ramsey sitting on a huge advantage here in terms of health, successfully gets that final hit and takes the round. Looks like stepping forward to possibly say hi to the ghost of Supine Swine over there. But it looks like they're moving on to the next round, so I think that means that we were able to catch them not quite at the beginning of that round, but hopefully towards the beginning of the match. So Supine Swine able to ban a class, and we'll see what they go with in the next round. It looks like it was not a really good matchup for Supine Swine there, with the knight able to either get around or blast through those shield bars, and while successfully blocking most of those attacks. So Swine is going to want to mix it up in some way, possibly changing their own class, or if they're comfortable with the Reaper, possibly just trying to block Ramsey from being able to fight back with that knight. Very effective class in Ramsey's hands. All right, looks like they have chosen their next classes, so we're moving on to the next round here. It looks like, yeah, unfortunately another connection problem there. Yeah, unfortunately it does seem that there's a number of people who are spectating these matches in progress. Under normal circumstances, that would be fine, but again, blame me, there is a bug that causes the matches to freeze up in the cases where there's a multiple spectators watching a match, and then it tries to restart into a new match. Therefore, Proximo has told me that they're going to have to lock down the channel that is putting those codes out. So yeah, please, for the time being, just because we might be spectating any of these matches, please don't spectate with the spectator client of your own, just to make sure that we can keep the stream going as smooth as possible. All right. We're going to try to get back into another match. Lefishy and Ramsey, they'll have to reconnect to finish off the match. We're going to see if we can get into to watch that match again, but if not, we'll just have to move on to another one. In the meantime, while we try to get that sorted out, I will check out the stream chat again, just see if there's any other questions. Infinity JPW asks, is that the sword from Fortnite? Unfortunately not. None of the models that are used in Ironlights are taken from other games. And I highly doubt that that Fortnite's would actually looks quite so similar, but maybe that's just good taste in art. Let's see. Polly asks, is Berserker the best class? And tells me to say yes. So, yes. Berserker, definitely one of the interesting classes in the terms of the creation process. Um, the Berserker was originally conceived by Jeff, who was the other developer on other coder on Ironlights, and was sort of Jeff's brainchild. Um, and that was shortly before Jeff sort of moved on from Ironlights and started working on his own projects. And so he sort of passed the torch to me to finish off the Berserker. And I tried to do so, sort of maintaining Jeff's original kind of vision for the class as sort of this wild, very heavy, hard to control class. I think it turned out fairly well, but it also exposed some of the limitations of Ironlights' physics code. But I'm going to stop talking about that now because it is time to rejoin Ramsey and Supine Swine as they go into their second round. And it looks like both players have switched up significantly. Ramsey switching over to the Ninja, as we've seen him fighting with before. Supine Swine on the Duelist here. And I might be mistaken, but did they throw away their buckler? No, I'm sorry. I'm just misreading. I'm sorry. I'm watching on kind of a small screen. Ramsey goes in for the first attack. Again, we've seen this matchup once before, and as we have seen in the previous matches, the Duelist is able, more so than many classes, to block the multiple attacks coming out from a Ninja. Supine Swine doing some neat little spinning range attacks here, but it looks like for a second had a network hiccup there, dropped out, but is now back. Supine Swine taking the opportunity now to go in for the melee attack. But if the Duelist, has an opportunity with both the, rapier and buckler to block two blades of the Ninja, the Ninja really has the ability to defend against that single rapier. And indeed, we saw Ramsey able to successfully block all of those hits. Doesn't leave them with a significant advantage. Sometimes that matters a lot because it means you can maintain your momentum for energy regeneration without taking a single hit. But at that point, Ramsey was at full energy anyway, so it didn't really matter. And then, unfortunately for Supine Swine, this second attack, Ramsey was able to get a huge flurry of hits. Sometimes I think what happens is just if the Ninja player starts off with a big, swinging flurry of blows, you have to sort of figure out that pattern and that rhythm and match it. Unfortunately, it looks like Supine Swine had another network hiccup there, and at the end of it was left with Ramsey had fully regenerated energy, but Swine had not. Ramsey going in for the next big attack, and if they can finish it off, then that energy change doesn't really matter. And indeed, Ramsey with another crazy flurry of blows, able to perhaps mix up the rhythm or pattern such that Swine not able to block that effectively. It's interesting to see that, in part because we did see Swine successfully blocking the first attack coming out from Ramsey. So something changed, and often what we see is players adapting their style and their behavior over the course of a single round. And so that is what allowed Ramsey to start effectively delivering the hits and take that match. But we're going to hop right now into another match in progress, this between Terra Blaster and Dr. Guy. Let's see if we can, if that's going to be something we can get on screen. Looks like we have Terra Blaster on the Berserker versus Dr. Guy on the Samurai. So using that katana, getting some good blocks in with the shield bars to good effect. Dr. Guy choosing to charge up and go in on the attack, though Terra Blaster does not have any vulnerability showing right now. Able to get some hits and maintaining a lead in this case. Dr. Guy playing a little bit more aggressively, leaving a little bit of vulnerability showing at any given time. And then going in for another attack before Terra Blaster able to get revenge there, hoping perhaps to do some damage and thereby heal some of that vulnerability. Doesn't fully do it, and so Terra Blaster gets some good damage done, but it's not enough to even out the fight. And at this point, Dr. Guy has already extended their lead in, a small lead in absolute health points. It doesn't always look like much, but when you're down to so little health, it starts looking like a lot more. Like you're seeing, that you have twice or triple the health of the opponent. And indeed, at this point, it looks hopeless for Terror Blaster. Dr. Guy able to save up just enough energy to go in for a short attack and finish it off. So congratulations there to Dr. Guy, taking that round, Duelist versus Berserker, very light class versus very heavy class. And it looks like they're not leaving the match, so hopefully we caught this match towards the beginning. Let's see. I believe this is Terror Blaster is also known as the Gilded Gladiator on Discord, based on what I'm seeing on the bracket. And interestingly, Dr. Guy switching over to Berserker, meaning that we now have a Berserker mirror match. Unless I'm mistaken, this is actually the first mirror match that we're seeing of this entire tournament, which is a bit of a rarity. But Berserker seems to be a lot more popular than I've seen in some previous tournaments. Dr. Guy with the first attack, getting a couple of huge headshots. The Berserker is a heavy and very offensively oriented class, so it kind of makes sense to be doing good damage here. It's very tricky to be able to block with both the hammerhead and the shaft at the same time. Terror Blaster trying to even things out, getting some good revenge here, and mostly, but not fully, doing so. So Dr. Guy finishing that first back and forth, which, always, in my opinion, sets the tone for the match with a slight advantage. Terror Blaster firing a little bit of a ranged attack. The Berserker ranged attack is definitely one of those things that's polarizing. Some people seeing it as completely useless, so it's relatively rare to see in a tournament setting, but also sometimes used to very good effect, both for harassment and to a lesser extent for absolute damage. Terror Blaster's melee attack not super effective, and then Dr. Guy coming in and landing hit after hit here is now really extending their lead more so than we saw in that first back and forth. Now Dr. Guy sitting at more than double the remaining health of Terror Blaster, and then charges up and goes in for an immediate follow-up, gets a couple of headshots, almost able to finish off the fight, only one more hit away. Terror Blaster with very little health left goes in for a big attack, and against Dr. Guy's vulnerability, able to do a good amount of damage, gets a couple of 600 damage hits. But ultimately, it's not enough to really turn the tide of this fight, meaning Dr. Guy able to take the fight and move on. This being a lower bracket fight, that means that, unfortunately, that is the last we'll be seeing of the Gilded Gladiator in this tournament. But congratulations for making it into the tournament as that Battleforged troll. And it was great that we got to see you on stream. That was a couple of interesting fights. Dr. Guy going to be moving on to lower bracket round 2 up against Synth, it looks like, on that bracket. All right, let's see if we are able to get into another match right away. Otherwise, I'm going to return to the stream chat and see if there's any other questions. As always, just feel free to post any questions you have for developers, and I'll try to catch up with everything. Aced Valor asked if I'm already plat, how do I get the Battle Hardened tag, or Battle Forged in this case? Just ask for it on the Discord, maybe ping one of the mods. Any of them should be able to get you hooked up. There's a link to the Discord on the Ironlights homepage on ironlightsgame.com if you need that. Okay, it looks like we're possibly connecting to a new match. It looks like it's going to be Ramsey versus Boy Gabe, assuming that I'm seeing these players' outfits correctly. Interestingly, they seem to be both using the exact same choice of armor and helm, the Gallant armor and the Crested helm, but very different styles of coloring, with Boy Gabe using a lapis and I think white or silver. Ramsey using a classic alabaster and gold. Honestly, very attractive costumes in this case, I believe. All right, Boy Gabe starting off on the knight, it seems. And Ramsey starting off on the Ninja, an interesting choice here. We've seen Ramsey fight with other classes in previous matches and switching to the Ninja after that's gotten banned. In this case, choosing to start with a Ninja. Ninja versus Knight is always an interesting matchup. That the Ninja able to block both the blades of the Knight, assuming that they can sort of get in position and anticipate those attacks properly. But the Knight famously has a hard time blocking both blades of the Ninja's katars. Ramsey goes in, gets a few blows, but then chooses to back out and instead charge up a bit with half a bar of energy remaining. The theory here is that they can do enough damage to heal that vulnerability over the course of the attack, which they successfully do. The question, I think, in part is, did they get enough energy from the charge up to mitigate the loss of energy, from having to start a separate attack, where there's a fixed cost of 7.5% of your energy bar every time that you start a new melee attack. Nevertheless, it doesn't seem like it really hurt them, and they were able to even out the fight. Ramsey, now successfully blocking most of these hits, takes a little bit of damage, but is left with a lot more energy than Boygate and goes in for revenge, charging up again a bit at the beginning. Boygate, considering the situation of the Knight's Greatsword versus those fast katars, doing a fantastic job on defense. So I think we're seeing some really good, just sort of moment-to-moment skill from the way that Boygate is handling that weapon. Ramsey, we have to give compliments there too, not only maintaining a slight lead, actually there's a very even fight, but Ramsey, I think, has been doing a good job of doing little charge ups that they're able to heal the vulnerability cost from, sort of getting, basically there's free energy on the table if you're smart about how you use it. And Ramsey has done a good job of making sure that that's not left on the table before starting an attack. And indeed, again, we saw Ramsey do sort of quick charge up, knowing that Boygate can't retaliate right there, and therefore able to extend the length of this melee attack. Unfortunately, it looks like we're having a network hiccup of our own. Not clear if these players are experiencing this or if that's just something coming out from the spectator, but it looks like the way that they're gesturing at each other that there was some network hiccup. Because this is a peer-to-peer game, one of these players is actually hosting the match. And therefore, if that player ends up with a network issue, then it can affect the spectator and everybody else. Okay, it seems like the I'm just now seeing on the main stream the technical difficulties tab. I'm not sure how long that's been up there, so apologies if I've been describing a match that you can't see. But since I can watch this, I am going to keep trying to describe what's going on. Ramsey is back on the attack, getting the sort of flurry of blows that we've seen in previous matches. But unfortunately, there's just another network hiccup real quick here. That looks like fairly short in duration, but both players have clearly been thrown off by this a little bit. We're seeing a bit of sort of stuttering, and that's affecting the way that the match is progressing. At this point, Ramsey can only afford one more hit, and there it goes. Boygate able to finish off the match. A really close battle all the way through there. And gosh, it's really unfortunate, the network issue that came up there. Sometimes something like that can be caused from a number of different factors, including something as simple as like if one of the players accidentally goes to their like a pass-through videos. And so, it's possible that it doesn't look like that's exactly what's happening in this case. It can also just be something going on with a router at home, or even somebody else in the same household starting to watch a video or something like that. I actually had pretty bad internet connection myself and only recently got that upgraded. So I know firsthand that even in situations where you wouldn't expect it, there's cases where upload speed especially can get bottlenecked, and that can cause a network problem. But I'm hoping that that's not something that was caused by either the game or our spectating. We'll see if the players are able to get that sorted out and possibly reconnect. I don't think Yeah, we saw that from the beginning. So that was only the first round of their match. So they're going to have to play a little bit more. Okay. In the meantime, I'm going to switch back to stream chat, checking for any other questions. I'm pretty far behind. I'm like only halfway through the stream chat since it's been the beginning of the stream, but I don't want to miss any questions that people have posted. So I'm going to try to go through in order. Synth says that a black cat named Void is badass. I mentioned that my cats were named Null and Void earlier. Okay, it looks like we're connected again to Ramsey and Boy Gabe. Prox, I don't have the sort of early stream, but okay, never mind. Coming back now. Okay, let's see. It looks like we've switched to Boy Gabe playing the Reaper and Ramsey switching over to the Knight. So both players have actually switched their classes, interestingly. Not something that happens all the time because only one player gets to ban. Ramsey, at this point, with a slight advantage in terms of health. Boy Gabe trying to even that out now and successfully does so. Doing this sort of harvesting back and forth technique that we've sometimes seen from Reaper is able to successfully whittle down a lot of health. But Ramsey sitting on quite a bit of energy, and we can tell from the way that this match is set up when we hop into it that Ramsey has successfully done a good amount of damage in the past. But Boy Gabe successfully doing a good amount of blocking, leaving this almost at an even fight halfway through. Very close right now in terms of total health left. Boy Gabe has been sending out a number of ranged attacks. Unclear if any of those have been hitting necessarily, which means that Ramsey has a slight advantage in terms of energy. Boy Gabe goes in for the attack. Ramsey doing some interesting ducking and dodging to avoid some of those hits, as well as getting a couple of blocks. But many of those hits are, albeit to the lower body. Ramsey now, with a full bar of energy, is going to try to get some serious revenge. Take some hits on the way in from ranged attacks, so that's fine. That's paid off there for Boy Gabe. But Ramsey, with the pure melee damage coming out from that greatsword, able to do some good damage, enough to even the fight out a little bit, taking a slight lead. It's also not clear if the state that Boy Gabe's shield bars are in. It looks like they're pretty well whittled down. But it's unclear from our vantage point exactly how healthy that shield is. There's now sort of a gap in between the melee attacks, meaning there's some time for that shield to recharge. But now with both players sitting on pretty good bars of energy, ready to do some long melee attacks, Boy Gabe goes in first and gets some damage done, takes a slight lead. But Ramsey, sitting on so much energy, there seems like no way that Boy Gabe's going to be able to maintain that lead. And indeed is now in a fight for their life. Boy Gabe can't really afford to take any more of those big hits. Takes a little one blade hit to the head, and then 2 blades to the body is enough to finish it off, meaning that Ramsey will be taking that round. That means that we're now at 1-1 in this match. Both players having a class presumably banned, and we'll be going into round 3 to determine who's going to be moving forward. This is round 3 of our Major League tournament out of really only 5, which means that this is basically the quarterfinals for the winner's bracket. Whoever is able to win this next fight is going to be moving on to face the attacker in our semifinals, and therefore is locked in to one of the top 3 spots of this tournament. All right, Ramsey switched over to Berserker, and it looks like Boy Gabe on the Katana. So no repeats of any classes on these players. It looks like there's a lot of changing up of which classes they can play, showing a lot of depth from both players. That means that it can be hard to sort of know what's coming, or to prepare or counter pick. And I think both players are using that to their advantage, sort of making sure that you don't know, what's coming. They could be playing anything. Ramsey gets a couple of good hits, but what's really going to matter is whether they're able to successfully block this katana. we've seen this type of matchup before, and I believe in the very first match that we streamed today, and as I mentioned then, the Berserker is one of those big heavy classes that can have a hard time with blocking, but might be able to block the Katana more so than other classes because they have the one really large hitbox on the shaft of the hammer. Struggling to do some big damage, but I spoke too soon actually. Now that's really adding up, and boy Gabe going down to less than half health. Ramsey sitting on very little non-vulnerable health, but because Boy Gabe charged up at the same time, Boy Gabe was taking a ton of damage there. Now, oh, huge damage coming out from the samurai there. Each hit doing sometimes over 1,000 damage, almost evening the fight out there. But Ramsey wanting to keep up a ton of momentum here. I believe the strategy is breaking down the shield bars on that katana, trying to get hit after hit, and really just needs to get one last good hit in to finish things off. But that's a tricky thing to do. And although Ramsey is able to keep charging up and maintain some momentum, the hits coming out, the amount of damage coming out from that katana is enormous. Ramsey, though, now sitting on quite a bit more energy, able to charge up when Boy Gabe is not able to, and is able to land the final hit to finish it off. An extremely high variance, dangerous strategy coming out from Ramsey that paid off there in the third round, charging up their entire bar of energy, causing themselves to be fully vulnerable, and then as a result taking huge damage, over almost 1,200 damage at a time. That's over 10% of the health bar per hit coming out from Boy Gabe. And yeah, that was a really effective attack, but Ramsey showing that pure aggression can pay off if you know what you're doing. And because they kept up that pace, they never gave time for Boy Gabe's shield bars on the katana to regenerate, which meant that Boy Gabe's defense became more and more desperate and less effective as the match went on. Ramsey able to use that to their advantage, and continuing, even when down to so little health, continuing to charge up extremely aggressively, and basically sticking with that strategy, pursuing it even after taking those huge hits. Fantastic play on both sides there. And that means that Boy Gabe is not out of the tournament yet, is moving down to the lower bracket, but Ramsey gets to move forward to the semifinals of the upper bracket against the attacker. So congratulations there to Ramsey. All right, I'm going to, again, switch over to the stream chat, see if there's any other questions people have for me. Let's see. B mentions that the circle people in the stands kind of look like Among Us. I kind of see it. They don't have like the little, faceplate, but most people call them like egg people. They're sort of copying from the audience that you see in Rocket League. That was the main inspiration when I was making those. It's possible. I've thought about replacing them with a sort of different shape, something trying to be sort of more like a person silhouette. But at this point, I feel like they're almost iconic. I like keeping them as little egg people. Okay, let's see some more, and if there's any other questions coming up. B asks another question about Ironlights body pillows. There was a lot of questions like that in the Ask the Devs section of the Discord. Unfortunately, there are currently no plans for an Ironlights body pillow for any of the characters in the game. I don't even know how you would do that. They're empty pieces of armor. They're not especially cuddly, I have to say. But I did give permission in Ask the Devs that if anybody wants to somehow custom print their own body pillow of Ironlights characters, that they have my permission to do so. I won't sue you for copyright infringement or something. Okay. Fat Meme Lord asked, do we know who's narrating for today? Yes, I'm happy to reintroduce myself. I'm E. McNeil, the primary developer of Ironlights. And so that is why I'm going through the stream chat to answer any questions. I always sort of take this as like an opportunity for an informal Ask Me Anything session. So yeah, if anybody's curious, go ahead and post in the stream chat and I'll try and answer your questions. Dorito says, why did you guys copy Fortnite? I honestly, I hesitate to confess this, but I've never played Fortnite. I know that's not exactly an uncool thing to say, but I feel like it, as a game developer, it's a real gap in my experiences. I don't know, but anyway, yeah. Point is, no, it's impossible. We didn't copy from Fortnite. Let's see. Any other questions? Let's see. Sorry, everybody. Just got to sort of fast forward through here and catch up. I'm always a little behind on the stuff that gets posted. B asks, will you ever add anime girls into Ironlights? Not going to say that's a good question, but I'll answer it with a no. There are no plans to add anime girls into Ironlights, even though they're technically Unity-chan is a free anime girl asset that's designed for like testing Unity games and such, and would be relatively easy to do. So I guess you just can blame me for that. Clean asks, so what's the current meta right now? I don't know if that question is directed at me, but I think that it is probably best to either let other players answer that or to let the tournament speak for itself, because in a lot of cases, we sometimes see a kind of consensus, like common knowledge, or conventional wisdom, I guess I should call it, develop about the current meta. And then a surprising amount of the time we see that contradicted or violated in actual competitive tournaments. I don't know, of course, if that's the case right now, but that is something that we've observed in previous tournaments where certain classes, for instance, will be considered very underpowered or non-viable, and then will show up in a tournament and just crush the competition. So it is actually very instructive to watch tournaments like this and see just what actually emerges as a winning strategy. Seal asks, is Ironlights 2 looking epic? It depends on what you mean by that, because I think it's looking pretty good if you're looking at it in terms of sort of potential and sort of how I'm feeling about it, like different ideas that are getting experimented with and such. If you're talking about how it actually looks visually, no, it's terrible right now. It's a very early prototype before we've done any real artwork, and it's just borrowing a couple of assets from free sources online and from Ironlights 1. So that's one of the reasons I've hesitated to show the prototype for Ironlights 2. I know that it's pretty ugly right now, but the plan is to hopefully show something in some form, maybe just as sort of like a casual stream or something like that, to let people know what it is that we're working on and what might be in the future and going forward. Okay, it looks like we've just connected to the Attacker versus Ranzi, that upper bracket semifinals. So hopefully they'll be choosing their classes and we'll be hopping onto the that match right now. All right, I see a couple questions left in the stream chat. I'll save those for the next break. And for now, I'm going to switch over to checking out Ranzi versus the Attacker. And the Attacker looking like they're using the Knight, sticking with that greatsword, very popular class. And actually the same for Ranzi. So despite the popularity of the Knight, we've seen this weapon coming out over and over again. This is the first time that we've seen a mirror match between the two. And the Attacker starts off with a quick, tiny charge up, followed by the first melee attack, very appropriate for the name. Ramsey then going for a larger charge up, and the second attack going to be a little longer potentially, getting some good hits in at the beginning, taking a little bit of a lead and hoping to extend that a little more, leaving a little bit of vulnerability on the table, which the attacker immediately charges up to try to take out. And so we end up with this sort of feedback loop where both players are charging up to get enough energy to take out the vulnerability of the other player, but they're leaving vulnerability on themselves. And so it looks like that's petered out here. Both players pretty even now in terms of health and energy at this point. The attacker goes in for another big attack, gets two great headshots there, it looks like, double hits, leaving Ramsey slightly behind now. But Ramsey is sitting pretty, kind of waiting for that energy to charge up a little bit more. Lets the attacker go in for another short attack and takes another couple of hits. Ramsey can't afford to take that many hits from those quick, tiny attacks there. Ramsey also took a little bit of damage from a range attack on the way in, but then is able to go in for the melee attack, get a lot of time attacking there, but not getting enough damage out to even the score. The attacker now left with more energy, more vulnerability, more health. Overall, a significant lead, but not necessarily a safe lead. Ramsey, a little bit more effective on defense now than what we were seeing in the past. Unfortunately, it looks like another bit of a network hiccup there. Not clear what's causing that, but the attacker, even though sitting with less energy, goes in for the next melee attack. And again, it looks like Ramsey successfully able to block most of that until the end, where the attacker gets a couple of consequential hits. Ramsey, with more than a half bar of energy, able to go in for a long melee attack, do some damage against the attacker's vulnerability, getting a few good hits in. This is a respectable attack. But Ramsey at this point is down to about 20% health, needs to do better than respectable in order to win their way back. The attacker goes in for the next melee assault, able to get hit right off the bat, and at this point not doing huge amounts of damage, but really whittling down Ramsey. And the attacker doing a good job also firing out those ranged attacks when Ramsey is moving forward, which is always dangerous. That night ranged attack can do a ton of damage if you're able to land the hit precisely timed right before the opponent goes in for the assault. Ramsey's attack unable to land a hit there, which means the attacker able to survive and build up just enough energy for another assault, leaving Ramsey with just a sliver of health. Ramsey chooses to put down the weapon and try to just dodge. The attacker kind of, I think, is let that go, and then is trying to do the same. But the attacker, after showing mercy, begs for mercy from Ramsey in turn. And after a little stage play there, which I very much appreciate from those players at the end of that round, the attacker goes in to finish off the fight. Congratulations to the attacker for that first round win. Ramsey is going to get to ban a class of their choosing, but we've seen a lot of depth from Ramsey of different classes of really Knight, Berserker, and Ninja that they can show some expertise with. So it's interesting to think what the correct ban would be. Possibly Ramsey would be happy to fight against a Knight as a Ninja, but that is not a clear thing. Possibly Ramsey would want to switch away from the Knight themselves if they can ensure that the attacker is not going to be using the Knight. So, we could be seeing something like trying to set up another Berserker versus Katana fight or something like that. All right, looks like the players have chosen their next classes, and we are moving into the next round. Indeed, Ramsey has chosen to switch over to the Ninja, and the attacker has, in fact, chosen to switch over to the Samurai. But this is sort of a different battle than what we've seen sometimes in the past. I don't think we've actually seen this particular matchup happen so far this tournament. Um, in the past, we've seen Ranzi fighting against a knight with the ninja, or fighting against a samurai as a berserker. Um, Looks like Ranzi is adjusting their play position, is sort of asking for a short timeout there. Not exactly sure what's happening, but it is possible, that the players are just communicating with each other. Some sort of real world situation is, forcing them to take a moment off. And I always think that it's sort of a show of sportsmanship to allow the other player, that moment to take that, to take care of whatever it is that's holding them up. And it looks like Ranzi surrendered there. Unclear if this is the players trying to restart the match. Okay, it looks like, so what I'm hearing is that it might be that they're asking for a different map because the attacker is using an all black color scheme, and on certain night maps that can be very difficult to view. So it looks like they've just chosen to restart with the same classes, so that this is still the second round here. And now that we're on a sunset match where the attacker will be more visible, hopping into this match, and the attacker started off with several big melee attacks, able to get some damage. Now it is the first time that we're going to see Ranzi on the attack here on offense. The attacker one, he's got that katana, which is a fairly fast weapon, but it's not really meant for that's up close style fighting. Instead, the attacker has to rely more on the shield bars of that weapon, which is really tricky to do. Ranzi taking some big hits on occasion from this katana. There's a lot of flexibility that comes with having the two weapons with the ninja, but they're not actually so much faster than other weapons. And indeed, because of the length of the katana, it actually does have a higher speed than those katars. So Ranzi definitely on the back foot, taking a ton of damage from those samurai attacks. Able to reliably do sort of a constant stream of damage when attacking himself, but that's not going to be enough when Ranzi really needs to sort of have some means of turning this fight around. Able to get some good damage now against the attacker's vulnerability, and that might be one avenue of being able to sort of make it work if Ranzi can attack against vulnerability specifically. But in order to do that, Ranzi needs to have really, really successful defenses to make sure that the attacker, A, can't just win too soon, and B, can't heal the vulnerability that they're incurring from those charge-ups. So yes, again, Ranzi now doing much more significant damage because they're able to attack against the attacker's vulnerable health, but needs really almost perfect defense at this point and is not quite managing that, taking a couple of hits there that they're going to add up when there's just not enough health left. And Ranzi choosing to charge up, leaving vulnerability of their own. That's a dangerous choice here, and possibly a necessary one, depending on the sort of desperation of the circumstances. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. The attacker is able to avoid taking damage and instead dishes out enough to finish off Ranzi. That means Ranzi is getting knocked down to the lower bracket. We'll be fighting in the lower bracket semifinals, though. Still locked in for third or, between third and first place. That none of that has changed at this point. But the attacker has set themselves up as the favorite now, moving into the finals of the upper bracket. And whoever rises up through the lower bracket to challenge the attacker is going to have to beat him twice, due to the fact that the attacker has never lost a match so far in this tournament. Meanwhile, in the lower bracket, there's a few rounds to go through. It's always tricky sort of making sure that we have, different people lined up at, the appropriate times, that all the different rounds are moving forward. And so it looks like there's going to be one or two rounds before we're going to get to see Ramsey fighting again for the chance to move back up to the finals. The current state of the bracket shows Prod Rye has won in round 3 and moved on to round 4. And Prod Rye will be facing whoever wins between Dr. Guy and Boy Gabe, both of whom we have seen before on stream this tournament. And so between those three, Prod Rye, Boy Gabe, and Dr. Guy, one of them will get to face Ramsey for the chance to get into the finals. So we still have a few more matches left ahead of us, but I'm going to switch back over to the stream chat. As always, I'm happy to ask any question or answer any questions that you have about Ironlights or the development thereof, or about the development of Ironlights 2, which has begun. All right, let's see. Electro Spaghetti asks, how much limitations are on the bots? Would it be possible to add our own modifiers similar to custom matches / campaign? So limitations on the bots, the way that they're implemented right now, as I'm sure you know, there's no setup to allow for custom modifiers and things like that, either in the campaign or in the sandbox mode. The sandbox is basically equally powerful as the main campaign stuff. So custom matches, and they, or I guess unless you're considering like the difficulty settings, which are something that can affect how the campaign bots go. But I believe that the difficulty settings on the campaign actually carry over to the sandbox mode, so you can kind of do that together. But the custom matches allow you to do all sorts of stuff, like changing the time scale of melee attacks, or allowing two-sided combat and fun things like that. There's currently no setup in the code to hook that up for a single player. It was never something that was sort of like a use case that was we envisioned. However, I wouldn't say that it's impossible to set that up. Fundamentally, it's a set of variables that are just sort of read by the match when the game gets started. So that is possible as something to add in a future match. There's just no way to do it right now. It's not something that's easily moddable, for example. So yeah, in the future update, I would say that it's possible either that would be added, or if I might be concerned about making things sort of too complicated on the user interface side, or like players not knowing what's going on if some of those settings are changed in sandbox modes, sandbox games that they download. It might be something that is allowed as a, something that's easily moddable in. Reggie branches off of that question to ask, would we ever have event animations for Sandbox Box? Example, animation played when your bot health is low, when player health is low, etc. That would be a little bit more of an extension of the system as it's currently set up. Everything really is built around a few different animation types. Basically, the ones that you're seeing in the the sandbox mode when you record animations. That's all that the AI currently acknowledges or works off of. And so if you to add special animations for certain events, it would require a bit more change to the code than I expect I would be comfortable with. It's not, I guess whenever I'm looking at a feature like this, and this is something that you can sort of generalize to a lot of feature requests, there's a balance to be made between what's the ease of implementation on my side, and then the gain, how widely used and how much appreciated it would be by different players. So it's something that seems like it would be cool, but it's primarily an aesthetic thing that is not sort of fundamentally needed in the game. But I'm going to cut myself off so that we can move on to checking out the next game, the lower bracket semifinal. We have Prod Rye here, first time that we are seeing them in the tournament, but they have been fighting very well, up through the lower bracket. um, playing on the Samurai here, versus Boy Gabe, who we saw fighting earlier and who recently just finished fighting past Dr. Guy to make it up to this lower bracket semifinal match. Um, Another first time mirror match for this tournament. This is our first time seeing the two samurais fighting each other. Always an interesting matchup because those katanas are so fast. They are usually very difficult to block, but you have the ability to block them because you have the same physics as your opponent. It looks like Prodrai finishing off with a very slight advantage in that first sort of trend-setting match there, and Boy Gabe now firing off a number of range attacks. Actually, successfully lands a hit on Prodrai there, not doing a ton of damage, but arresting the momentum of energy regeneration there. Not doing a ton, overall to sort of even out the health or energy though. And Prodrai eventually just decides to go in for the melee attack, gets a couple of good hits, including that big 600 damage headshot. Both players do a quick charge up, and Prodrai goes in for another attack right away, but isn't able to land a hit off of it. Boy Gabe now a little bit behind in health, slightly more ahead in terms of energy, so they have the opportunity right here to try to even it out, and indeed successfully does so. Prodrai now falling behind in terms of absolute health. It's always tricky to tell exactly who's ahead when the energy is not even between the players, because that's sort of potential damage done. It's all modified and filtered through the skill of how the players use those weapons. But Prodrai now on the assault, getting hit after hit, really sneaking around the defenses, and again does the same maneuver of backing up, doing a quick charge up, and then attacking right away again, meaning, but doesn't land a hit. So Boy Gabe taking a little too much damage there, charging up to get a lot of extra energy, and again taking the lead back in terms of health, but leaving a lot of vulnerability. Prodrai responds by incurring the same amount of vulnerability. Now both players really in a dangerous sort of situation. Prodrai goes in for the attack, which I think is strategically the correct move, because doing some of that damage will heal some of the vulnerability incurred, meaning Prodrai evens the score out again. We're back again to almost a perfectly even match. Boy Gabe, not happy with that, goes in, gets another good headshot. But with that slight vulnerability still on the table, now Prodrai chooses to charge up. So both players fairly vulnerable. A really tricky match to analyze here. Both players really keeping it very even, or constantly sort of going between. What's going to matter is just these last few hits, who's able to finish off the opponent. Prodrai, left with no health remaining, is going to die on the next hit, chooses to go in for the attack, needs to get a couple of big hits here, gets one, but not enough to finish it off. Boy Gabe now just needs any hit and is able to land a big headshot there, cleaving through Prodrai, taking round one in a very, very close match or close game there. Yeah, a tricky fight there, and Prodrai sitting down for a break, it seems, or perhaps to type out the ban. But yeah, is going to get to ban the class of their choice from Boy Gabe, meaning that we might be seeing Samurai versus something else. It is sort of the typical pattern emerges. But of course, these players can always choose to violate that assumption, to switch to some other class that we haven't seen them use before, or try to sort of counterpick in a clever way. Let's see what they end up choosing. The classes have now been chosen, and we're moving into the next round. All right, looks like Prodrai is in fact sticking with that katana. Boy Gabe switching over to the duelist. And this is possibly an interesting matchup. The duelist in the past has sometimes been considered an effective counterpick. So possibly Boy Gabe's Samurai was banned, but he assumed that Prodrai was going to be picking Samurai again and specifically counterpicked that. Despite that sometime reputation, though, this duelist is not blocking everything that's coming out from Prodrai. Prodrai able to get a few consequential hits. And Boy Gabe now on the attack. The Duelist has a lot of speed and flexibility, but it is true that katana is a fast weapon in its own right, and that means that Boy Gabe not able to put out the same velocity of damage, the same sort of throughput that we could see on something like a samurai or a knight. At the end of that first back and forth, Boy Gabe is actually on the back foot, Prodrai with a slight lead. And that increases over the course of the sort of ranged battle that we saw there, as Prodrai maintained a greater energy balance. Now on the attack again, able to get at least a couple of big hits in. Really what what Boy Gabe needs to do at this point is be able to adapt the sort of moment-to-moment, low-level, skill-based weapon movement strategy. Be able to adapt that to just stop taking big hits from Boy Gabe, which, the more I say it, I sound like John Madden, talking about how, if you're going to win football, you got to score more points than the other guy. Like, yes, I acknowledge that I'm basically just saying try not to get hit. But I think that that's very possible from a duelist, and versus a samurai, the duelist has the kind of flexibility needed to avoid those attacks. And yeah, it ultimately becomes a matter of actually knowing sort of the way that your opponent is attacking and being able to sort of predict that. And indeed, I think that might be what we're seeing right here. Several attacks in a row being successfully blocked, but then it switches up. Prodrai able to get a couple of good hits in for 900 damage total. The other half of the equation is that we've seen really successful defense from Prodrai. It's true that that's just a single-bladed rapier, and the katana is a fast weapon itself. So Boy Gabe not quite able to take the lead, but able to sort of slightly reduce Prodrai's lead. Needs to be able to keep that up if we're going to continue. Oh, takes a couple of hits there from Prodrai's range attack, basically forcing out the attack here from Boy Gabe, since Boy Gabe can't afford to let Prodrai sit on a higher energy regeneration for long. Evens out the health situation, but now Prodrai on the attack with that remaining energy. Only needs to get a couple of hits. Basically anything here is what's going to establish their lead. And at the end of that, Boy Gabe took a little bit of damage, is still behind Prodrai, but is holding on, is not allowing Prodrai to run away with this round. If Boy Gabe can manage to turn this around, it will be an upset in the context of this particular round, but it would be a second round win, able to take the match entirely. So yeah, Prodrai can't allow that to happen. Needs to make it to round 3 by being able to sneak around this defense right here. But Boy Gabe really showing that adaptation that I was talking about before. I think did exactly what I was talking about. Has successfully adapted the strategy to block a much greater proportion of the damage coming out from Prodrai. With that said, we all know that both players can change strategies and adapt. It is entirely possible for Prodrai to change up the way that he's attacking and be able to start doing that damage again. Boy Gabe attacks, then backs up, charges up, and attacks again, possibly able to do a little extra damage by virtue of building up that vulnerability, getting the free energy, and healing it up with the damage after the fact. But I don't know if it was really that much, and if it, again, counterbalances the extra energy cost from doing a separate attack. Prodrai on the attack, able to get now 2 significant hits, bringing Boy Gabe down to really a serious danger zone in terms of total health. Prodrai chooses to charge up, ready to try to finish it off, but Boy Gabe sneaks the attack first, able to do some damage against vulnerability. Taking the lead now in terms of health, going to try to finish this off, but Prodrai still holding on. Both players now really in that danger zone where a single attack can finish them off. Prodrai needs to get a couple of big hits in here. It's really just a matter of whether you can sneak out those last few hits. Now Boy Gabe with the advantage just needs to get 1 or 2 hits in. Runs in, doesn't quite land them though. Incredible defense there from Prodrai. both players just need one hit really to finish this off. Prodrai goes in for the attack, isn't quite able to manage it. Really desperate, impressive defense from both players here. Boy Gabe goes in for an attack, able to tap the opponent on the hat. That's all it takes at this point. So little health left at the end of that match. What an incredible final end to that match there. Such low health, both players just desperate for the last couple hits and showing really, really skilled defense. I think really high quality fighting there that we're seeing from both of those players. I think it's a shame that we didn't see Prodrai earlier in the tournament, but I'm really glad we got to see them play here in the lower bracket semifinals. So that means Boy Gabe is going to get to move on to fight against Ranzi and fight for the chance at getting to the attacker. Prodrai knocked out of the tournament in 4th place. A really respectable finish. And I was happy to see how that played out there. All right. As I mentioned, Boy Gabe now moving forward to lower bracket, round 5, fighting up against Ranzi. We'll be getting into that match as soon as we're able to. And whoever wins that fight goes up to fight against the attacker for the ultimate finals. While we wait for that match to get going, I'm going to switch back over to the stream chat to check out any other questions that we have for sort of ask the devs anything. Yeah, I'm a little bit back in time watching some of the comments here. A lot of comments about the ridiculous samurai damage that we saw in some of those fights. Victor the Mad King asks, how are the numbers of viewers in these tournament streams trending? Are newer tournaments being watched more? They are actually being watched almost exactly the same. To tell the truth, the viewership and participation in the tournaments has remained remarkably even over time. The sort of mental model that I've constructed, or that I'm using for how, to explain this, is that there is there's the population of sort of all Ironlights players, and a lot of them are relatively casual. A lot of them, they'll only play for a short while, and that's all well and good. I think it's totally fine for some players to try it out and drop out quickly, or try it out and rank up to silver or gold and then decide that they had enough. But then there's the players who really stick with it, who often we see in the Discord and who we see showing up in these tournaments. And over time, even though the game has gained in popularity, the number of players who are interested in fighting in tournaments and observing the tournaments has, it's changed in size a little bit, but within sort of it's never more than doubled or halved from a certain range. So right now we have around 30 people watching live, and the video will be saved on Twitch for anyone to watch later, but that's pretty standard. So basically I see this as the club of very skilled, dedicated, or interested players and spectators, doing this as sort of a community event rather than a major esports event or as a promotional thing. Okay, it looks like I dropped out for a second there. Prox, am I live again? Say that again, sorry? Okay, my bad. All right, Polly asks, hey E, what are your thoughts on the newly found Reaper glitch? I found it wasn't in the sandbox mode, and the sandbox mode Reaper seems to have more shield than current. Actually didn't know that about the sandbox mode. So the Reaper glitch that I believe that you're referring to is the shield bars on the scythe getting slightly regenerated when when you strike with the blade of the scythe, if it's been fully depleted. And yeah, that's something that's consequential that I will be looking into and fixing in the next update. I didn't know that it wasn't in sandbox mode though, and that's very curious because it seems like there's no reason that should be the case or not. So yeah, I'll have to check that out. I haven't looked into the glitch yet in terms of what's causing it, but it does seem possible that it has something to do with the way that data is communicated over the network. That, for instance, if if every time that you strike, it has to communicate like what the current shield health is, and for some reason isn't recognizing 0 as a valid value because it's because it's rounding or something like that, or if there's an incorrect setting, potentially that could be what causes it to come back again and again, and maybe that's not happening in sandbox. But at this point, it's a sort of a very technical question that I don't know the answer to. So basically, yeah, I've been notified about it. I checked it out in the bug reports, and it will be addressed in the next update. Okay, still trying to. We always have to make sure that players, especially towards this end of a tournament when they might have to fight again and again and again in order, they might need a moment between matches. But we're waiting for them to connect, and we'll be hopping into that as soon as it's available. All right, still I'm going through stream chat. Sorry, I'm a little behind here, just checking for any other questions. Dorito asks, when are the body pillows coming out? Yeah, I'm gonna have to let that be a fan-driven initiative. So, Dorito2701, I hereby empower you to print your own Ironlights body pillows, and but I can't promise any more support than that. Apologies. Polly asks, am I cool? Yeah, you're cool. Let's see. Victor comments that he finds the matches very fun to watch. Maybe casual interest will pick up over time. That would be awesome. Yeah, we're running tournaments at a lower frequency than we have in the past. I'm not sure if that means that interest is higher because they're more rare and precious, or lower because people are less in the habit of checking them out. But I do feel that they're sort of an important part of the Ironlights community scene. And what we're doing right now is, this month we're hosting a major league tournament, which is sort of, it's not available to those who've previously won a major league tournament, but aside from that, it's open to anybody who is of a platinum rank or higher in game. And then next month we're planning on doing an invitational tournament. The idea there being, anybody who's previously won a major league tournament can participate, and they can each invite somebody else. And so that tends to be sort of the, previous champions, as well as, notable players or whoever's active and able to sort of finagle an invitation to that, which I feel like is sort of a nice balance. We're able to get like newcomers, including some of the players today that, I haven't seen fighting before, as well as sort of the cream of the crop fighting against each other. It's fun, I think, both to watch, it's fun, to participate in if you're one of those players, and it's actually useful from a dev perspective to get a sense of the way that different fights can play out, and sort of, what it looks like at that top end. It used to be that I could just play the game and be able to get a sense of, how the dynamics play out, what the most competitive classes are and stuff like that. Later on, that has become less and less the case as I've been eclipsed in skill by, the other players of Ironlights. At this point, I'm a middling Ironlights player. I can beat newbies, but almost anybody who shows up in one of these tournaments could crush me. And we did something called a boss battle weekend some time ago, where myself and some of the other major league champions, or I shouldn't say other major league champions, some of the major league champions and me made ourselves available for duels for anybody who wanted, over the course of a weekend. And sure enough, I could not hold up against most of the people who are, competitive and showing up in the Ironlights Discord frequently. Oh yeah asks, when are we getting teaser clips of Ironlights 2, and will Ironlights 1 still be relevant at release? So I'll answer the second part of that first, whether Ironlights 1 will still be relevant. So Ironlights 2, the plan is, as you probably know, making it like a 4-player co-op ARPG roguelike type thing, sort of like 4-player Hades with Ironlights combat, or like Diablo in VR, something like that. And the one of the interesting things about that, even though I very much would like to support PvP and hope to be able to have 4-player fighting and 2v2s and stuff like that, the primary focus is on the co-op aspect of it. And that means that if there's a situation where I have to really choose between something that's good for competitive, tournament style, fair PvP duels versus, choosing something that makes the co-op experience better, I'm going to choose the co-op experience for Ironlights 2. And that was not at all the case for Ironlights 1. So basically, my expectation is that when Ironlights 2 comes out, there will be some improvements from Ironlights 1. I'm hoping to do, different physics and things like that. But it's going to be a very different experience, and it's probably not going to support this kind of, highly competitive, individual esport type situation. I think Ironlights 1 will still be relevant for that. And I will respond to the rest of that later, because Boy Gabe and Ranzi have connected to each other, and it looks like we are ready to follow that match. And here they are. Starting off, Ranzi looks like is starting off on the Ninja versus Boy Gabe starting with the Knight. We have seen this matchup once or twice before. Always interesting, somewhat tricky for defense for that Knight. But it's still not a sure thing. It's definitely sort of a different experience than it used to be. There was a time when the Ninja was kind of a clear counter pick, and I don't feel like that's the case anymore. All right. Boy Gabe starting off with the first attack, able to get a couple of big double hits in here. Ranzi able to block a few of those, though, starting to block more over the course of that attack. Then going in on the assault himself, Ranzi able to get a number of hits here. Pretty good defense coming out from Boy Gabe. I'm just realizing that we actually saw this matchup between Ranzi and Boy Gabe once before in the upper bracket round 3, so this is actually a rematch between these players. But this time they're both in the lower bracket, and only one of them is going to get to move on to the finals. Boy Gabe shooting those huge ranged attack blasts, not considered an exploit, but definitely something that I'll be looking at patching out in the future. So far, Ranzi has not fallen prey to it. Instead, Ranzi's taking a lot of damage just from regular melee attacks. They're taking a couple of headshots there that Ranzi possibly can't afford. Chooses to charge up a little and then goes in for a melee attack. Unfortunately, takes a little bit of damage to that vulnerability from stepping outside of the movement boundary there, but does enough damage to mostly even the score here against Boy Gabe. I think, Ranzi really wanted to be up close and personal for that, ended up taking a little bit of damage, but whether that was worth it or not remains to be seen. Boy Gabe chooses to go in for the next melee attack, not having quite as much energy left as Ranzi. Able to land a couple of good hits, but not landing big double hits, and also not any big headshots. So some of those were sort of low damage hits to the lower body. Ranzi going back for revenge. Very difficult to block all of these hits for a Knight, and at the end of it, Ramsey able to bring down Boygabe's health to where he was at, but again takes a little bit of damage. Technically, Ramsey is very slightly behind at this point, I think. I'm not actually sure about that, but regardless, it's basically an even fight at this point. It's always nice at the end of these tournaments to see very, even battles that are coming down to the wire. Boygabe starts off this attack with a bit of a feint, sort of like hovering his sword there for a second. I'm not sure if that's sort of a mind game, like trying to distract Ramsey, but it is burning energy, so there's a cost involved to that type of approach. Ramsey then goes in with the same sort of aggressive flurry attack that we've seen before, and this time is able to chip through enough damage to finish off Boygabe, taking round one for Ramsey. Now, in the time that these two players fought in the upper bracket, we watched them on stream, and in that case, Ramsey was able to take the win of the match 2-1, and now has started off with this one-game lead in the second match, this rematch. But it is important that we note that Boygabe has won against Ramsey before, has shown that that is very possible, and so especially if Boygabe can ban that ninja or sort of pick and choose what Boygabe wants to fight against to some extent, that might change things moving forward. All right, so just waiting for these players to communicate the ban and pick their next class. I always appreciate this sort of overhead shot on the sunset levels, because we can kind of see the two players as shadows. You can imagine them sort of standing up as shadows from this perspective and gesturing to each other like that. Kind of a puppet show. Looks like they have chosen their new classes. Boygabe on the knight still, and Ramsey having, looks like, switched over to a knight himself. So now we are moving on to round two as a mirror match. Boygabe needs to take this win to survive in the tournament. Starts off with the first melee attack, able to get a couple of hits in. Yeah, doing respectable damage here. The knight is capable of enormous damage throughput, so it's sort of a question if Ramsey is able to do more, and what Boygabe's defense is going to be like. Ramsey already taking a bit of a lead in total damage done. Boygabe, we saw when Ramsey began his attack, fired off one of those ranged attacks to try to take out a bunch of damage, but Ramsey successfully blocked it and saw it coming on the way in. So yeah, Boygabe is doing some interesting, like, clever strategies here to sort of even the score, but it's not clear if that's paying off against Ramsey. Ramsey is not really falling prey very easily to some of those attacks. Ramsey tries to jump over that low attack and doesn't quite manage it. It's always a tricky maneuver. Yeah, Boygabe landing at least a few hits there, some double hits to the lower body, one to the shoulder, but even after that, Ramsey still finishing that with a slight advantage in terms of health, and a larger advantage in terms of energy. Despite having less energy, Boygabe goes in for the next attack, and again, comes out of it, charges up, fires that range attack, but Ramsey doesn't take the hit. Ramsey goes in and able to land some damage against that sliver of vulnerability, but more importantly, just cranking out damage after that, able to finish this off with a little less than double the damage of Boygabe, or double the health. Boygabe chooses to charge up, turning their entire health bar vulnerable. Needs to do enormous damage in order to make up for that, but isn't quite able to land it. Again, Boygabe charges up, fires that big blast ranged attack, and Ramsey, I don't think, took much damage from that, if any. But now, after charging up himself, Ramsey now is left with full vulnerability. Finally gets a good hit against Boygabe, but Boygabe's defense has suddenly cranked up a notch, is successfully blocking most of those hits. Ramsey doing a little hop to avoid that ranged attack, doesn't quite manage to block all of it. And then Boy Gabe able to do a good amount of damage there against Ramsey's vulnerability. Ramsey gets a great double hit, though, on the way back in, follows up with another. Now just leaving Boy Gabe with a sliver of health, just one hit away, with no ability to charge up and take out that vulnerability from Ramsey. Ramsey is able to get that last melee attack and poke out the opponent for that second round win. That'll be it then for that match. And Boy Gabe, after fighting all the way back up to the lower bracket semifinals, is knocked out of the tournament in third place. So congratulations to Boy Gabe, a good showing. Did successfully take a round off of Ramsey earlier, but Ramsey successfully able to win a second match against Boy Gabe and earning the right to move up to the finals for this last rematch against the attacker. So that means we are just left with this one last match, the finals of the attacker versus Ramsey. Ramsey, though, having lost the semifinals in the upper bracket, is going to have to win twice. So another win against the attacker just to put them on an even footing, and then a win after that to truly sort of, decide to break the tie, essentially. So that is quite a lot to ask, especially considering that the attacker has been very successful this tournament. If the bracket does not lie, the attacker has only lost one fight in this entire tournament, one round, and that was to Poli, who we saw earlier on stream. When we saw, I can't remember when, sorry about that. He possibly fighting the attacker earlier in the upper bracket. But in any case, just the one finals left. We'll see if we can get those two players connected and get to that final. In the meantime, I'll check out the stream chat again. Back to the questions that I was answering before. Aya asked, when are we getting teaser clips of Ironlights? I can't give a promise of any specific time, unfortunately, because it's just not clear when that's going to come together. I'm hoping soon. I'm hoping to do just sort of I think I've mentioned like a casual video or something, kind of a tour of the stuff that we're experimenting with so far. And then, I don't want to build up much expectations, because really all that there is like sort of a prototype test bed. There's like just this little island, and we're trying out different, abilities and weapons and stuff like that. So it's not really a game at this point. But, it might still be interesting to show sort of what we're working on. Poli asks, will there ever be any kind of Ironlights merch? It's something that we've sort of looked at. There's a couple of stores that can set that kind of thing up. But it's never something that I've actually followed through on. And, I'm not sure if that's something that's going to be a thing or not. But it's really a matter of just like kind of getting my act together and getting the art uploaded to the proper places. All right, I do promise to answer the remaining questions from Synth and B later, but it is now time for our finals match, so I'm going to focus on that. We have the attacker starting off on the Knight versus Ramsey on the Ninja. Again, this sort of classic matchup. We've seen Ramsey fighting his Ninja against Knights multiple times. We actually just saw Ramsey successfully defeating a Knight just the past match. So the question is whether Ramsey can manage to keep that up again here. The attacker doing some very aggressive, interesting moves here, sort of doing quick charge ups to fire off a single range attack or get in a quick melee hit. Ramsey, though, now going in for the first melee attack here. And as is usually the case, it's impossible to block all of those hits. Ramsey, at the end of that, possibly ending up with a very slight lead in terms of health, but the attacker choosing not to take that lying down, does a quick charge up followed by an attack to take the lead back in terms of health. Ramsey does the same, charges up, goes in for the assault, able to heal most of the vulnerability, but not quite all. And the attacker now left with a little bit of energy left, able to go in and get a couple of big hits, maybe several big hits in retaliation, chipping down Ramsey's health and extending that lead to something a little more consequential. It is really interesting sort of watching this happen, because there are several situations where the attacker is using those charge ups for that energy very effectively. Still taking damage from Ramsey, can't stop that damage coming through. And so, yeah, I don't think that that's a poor choice from Ramsey going with the ninja. The attacker, has sort of limited options in terms of the defense here, and especially, huge damage being taken with that vulnerability. But the attacker, we've never seen him hesitate when it comes to charging up and doing these aggressive assaults, especially when the opponent is showing vulnerability of their own. So, again, the attacker keeps charging up, going in for the attack, and in this case lands 2 big hits really quickly, able to finish off the fight, taking round 1. I think what's really fascinating about this style that we're seeing from the attacker is that there's multiple cases where, both players are seemingly on very even footing, seemingly in a very strong position, and the attacker just kind of makes damage happen from nowhere, it seems. I think part of that is if you can charge up, you get some energy, you incur a little vulnerability. If you can attack and do good damage there, enough to heal the vulnerability, then you're back in the exact same position you were at the start. And so we saw a moment there that I think was very sort of indicative of the attacker's strategy and skill, where both Ramsey and the attacker had 0 energy. Ramsey had a slight lead in terms of health, and then a moment later they still had 0 energy, but the attacker was suddenly ahead. And it's just sort of like magically making damage appear from nowhere. Okay, Ramsey choosing to go into this final battle with the fish as their weapon of choice. This is sadly not a legal class for a tournament. Possibly if the Ramsey sticks with this, then even if they manage to successfully defeat the attacker using the fish, it might not count, unfortunately. Ramsey able to land a hit for a good 95 damage headshot, over 100 damage. And it looks like the attacker is being completely stunned by the hits here. Actually physically getting smashed backwards, and actually, ouch. I think that the mental, psychic sort of aspect of this attack, of just knowing that you're being smacked with a fish, was enough to hit the attacker out of their movement boundary, which causes a ton of damage in sort of secondary effect there. So it's actually an interesting strategic move for Ramsey to go with the fish smacking method here, twirling the fish around, successfully defended there against the attacker's assault with the katana. Everybody knows the samurai is a very agile class, able to do a lot of damage per hit, but that doesn't matter if the opponent is able to block all of those hits with the fish. Ramsey, another long melee attack, not the fastest weapon in the game, and so only able to land about 3 hits. But we're seeing that Ramsey's making up for this in part by going with a very ranged attack focused strategy with the fish here. So yeah, we're seeing sort of a stream, like this constant arc of sort of drool coming out from the fish's mouth there, which the attacker at this point seems to have adapted to, is slicing those projectiles out of the air with the katana, taking a ton of damage now. Again, just trying to avoid getting hit by Ramsey's fish, so much so that the attacker's health bar has completely been depleted. Unfortunately, that means that the attacker is now out round 2. So that takes us to 1-1 for this match. Definitely not the way that I expected this finals match to go, but I can't say I'm disappointed. I'm not going to call it yet for the attacker, just because I feel like it would sort of be the correct move in some ways to say that Ramsey chose an illegal class, illegal weapons, and therefore, the attacker has won this finals match 2-0. But it doesn't seem too important to go with the correct choice when somebody's fighting with a fish. We do seem to have a bit of a disconnect there. It might be one of the players taking their headset off. But okay, now it looks like they've chosen the new weapons, so we're moving on to a final round. And it looks like Ramsey sticking with what works. It seems that, oddly enough, the attacker chose not to ban the fish despite losing to it in the previous match, possibly because it's not a legal class, that it doesn't seem like an obvious option to ban. Like, how can you ban something that's not on the menu? And possibly that means we have to put fish on the menu. Ramsey trying hard to get some of these range attacks to land. That there is an issue with range sometimes. Ramsey trying to spin the fish completely around their body, able to again land a big hit, and the attacker getting pushed around pretty solidly, just like before. I think strategically there's a couple of issues here. One of them is the attacker letting the fish slapping really get into their head, but the other issue is the attacker leaving their giant katana on the ground, which doesn't seem like the most effective approach, and is really like a strategic error of the sort that we haven't seen from the attacker in previous matches. So I don't know if this is just a matter of mind games really like getting to the attacker or not. But Ramsey seeing a lot of success after that first back and forth that always sets the tone for the battle. Ramsey sitting at a significant lead, taking only about half as much damage as the attacker has. Ramsey again stepping forward, trying to make it in range for that arcing attack of on the fish. The fish does seem to, he does seem to be using sort of an alternate two-handed kind of baseball bat-like grip, but it seems like the attacker has finally figured out a way to approach this that might be able to succeed here, successfully doing a bit more damage and taking the lead. But Ramsey is left with an entire bar of energy, which means that the attacker now is left with really no option except taking a ton of damage here against this, a ton of hits, I should say. It doesn't really add up to much damage, but Ramsey at this point has run out of energy and isn't able to land that last hit. Chooses to charge up though, and going in for a really aggressive second attack, successfully blocked though by the attacker, and Ramsey doesn't have the momentum to be able to recharge that fish and get a second hit in. That means the attacker now left with the advantage both in terms of health and energy, and if the attacker had not already won by disqualification at this point, really only needs to win this last round to take the finals. Ramsey, though, choosing to turn the fish towards the camera and shoot towards, sort of from the fish's mouth straight into our eyes. I don't know if I appreciate that. But continuing to try to smack the attacker over the head with the fish, because of the slow-mo effect, it doesn't end up looking so much like smacking the opponent with a fish as much as trying to knight them with a very inefficient sword. Ramsey, again, showing some aggression, going in for the next attack a second time, able to land a hit. Some of those attacks seem like they're getting blocked by the shield bars of the katana, which is just sort of hovering there in space, not actually being actively used by the attacker. Right, the attacker choosing to follow up now, still has a lead in terms of health, but at this point is actually not doing as much damage as we'd expect. A lot of these hits getting blocked by the fish. Some people would think that a very sharp Japanese blade would be able to break through a fish. In fact, that's something that we see demonstrated in sushi restaurants every day. In this case, it doesn't seem to be working, possibly because that fish is made out of gold and alabaster. So it's not really what you would expect. It looks like the attacker is trying to follow up with fisticuffs. It seems to be like giving up hope of using the katana to its fullest extent. So the attacker now holding back, and waiting for Ramsey to sort of take his turn. Ramsey, again, with sort of the big two-handed swing, hits the attacker outside of the attacker's movement boundary, meaning that if the attacker can't recover from this, yes, Ramsey has now, in fact, almost taken the lead back in terms of health. Yeah, it looks like the attacker is, again, letting Ramsey do damage in the same way that Ramsey did in the first round of getting in the attacker's head, getting smacked by a fish, and the attacker ends up pushed out of the movement boundary, which causes a significant amount of secondary damage. Ooh, Ramsey coming in with sort of a thrusting attack, poking the fish, sort of like a kissing fish attack, straight into the face of the attacker. The attacker is sort of gently tapping the fish now with the katana. I think possibly the idea there is to sort of demoralize the fish and take it out of the fight. But Ramsey has picked it up again, and now with a more significant lead from the attacker trying to move too far forward, stepping back into the attack, not quite able to land the hits, only getting one relatively low damage hit there. But possibly it's relatively high damage for the fish. It's just, the competition is pretty low. The attacker is sort of flailing in response here, trying to, I believe, dodge the fish there, but successfully gets several blocks in. So possibly the attacker is more successful here than he would admit to himself, that, seems to be showing a lot more fear than is possibly, rational to show against a dead fish. All right, both players sort of staring each other down. We kind of have this Mexican standoff situation, waiting for each other to make the first move. But the attacker goes in first, able to land another couple of crushing blows against the attacker. I think, it's important to remember that this is a virtual sport. The attacker is not actually getting pushed around here. And despite the apparent concussion caused by this fish, this is really just a matter of sort of the mental game. And it looks like the attacker is choosing to commit seppuku instead of accepting any further time fighting against this fish, which means that would be a second round, a second win for Ramsey, taking this match 2-1. So yeah, a big congratulations to Ramsey, showing sort of the potential appeal of the fish in this case. We're going to have to see sort of what the players choose to do at this point. If we accept the fish matches here, we'd have to move on to the true finals, but I really don't think that we should do that, because it's not allowed. So the attacker and Ramsey, congratulations on making it to the finals, but unfortunately the judge's decision is going to hand this match to the attacker. I hope this is not going to cause a scandal in the Discord community, but there you have it. Despite the dramatic suicide at the end there, the attacker is going to be our winner of this Major League tournament. So that's that then for our tournament. I'm sorry to Ramsey and the attacker for leaving you hanging there, but we're going to call it there for the tournament. Congratulations then to everybody, to Ramsey for making it to second place, for the attacker for taking the win. The attacker is going to get the champion's helm as the reward here, and have a chance to get one of their bots baked into the game. I'm going to finish off here by answering a couple of questions remaining in the stream chat. Let's see. Synth asked, could we get an image of the development of Ironlights 2? As I mentioned, probably we'll be doing like a sort of preview stream or something to that effect. But the images are nothing to show right now. There's no new art. There's nothing that's meaningful to show you in terms of screenshots. B asks, for Ironlights 2, would enemy models be similar to what we have now, floating armor vibe, or things like goblins and golems? The plan is for player models to be very similar to what we have, and some enemy models, excuse me, to be of the same sort. Basically, like, as mirrors of the players, that kind of thing. Um, the rest is not quite clear because I would really like to include some other types of enemies, different models, and different larger, smaller, flying enemies, all sorts. But I haven't actually to figure that how that's going to work yet, or what that would what that would really mean. Um, I don't think that doing sort of traditional type enemies, where sort of rigged and modeled with pre-baked animations, is really the best way to approach this. I would like to be able to like at least animate enemies in a similar way to stuff that we've done so far, but none of that has been decided. So yeah, at this point, the test enemies that we have are just floating armors along with the players, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And then it looks like that was it for questions. Ramsey asked, can you make a fish a playable class in casual matches? Probably I would like to at some point add the ability in casual matches to have a mutual opt-in button, so that you could bring up the sandbox weapons as options for those matches. But that obviously that hasn't happened yet. That's more likely than just putting the fish in as an option, as a playable class. But okay, now that last question goes to Ramsey in honor of the epic final there. But that'll be it for the stream chat Ask Me Anything. Thank you so much for watching. Check the Discord for more tournament announcements if you're interested in participating or watching any more. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Bye, everybody.